Hello, hello, hello. We're here with another ELSA PMO session, and this one's going to be a little bit different because I feel I'm in the mood for a bit of fisticuffs. We are here to talk about the trends for PMO in 2023, something that we do at the beginning of each year. And we've got some lodgers with us, which in other words means that they've all got big opinions and not afraid to share them. And I thought it'd be really good to have a look at what the trends are and, kind of pick them apart. So in terms of, you today, in the session, you can interject in any of the chats. You can stick your hand up and say, no, lodger, get back in your box. You're talking rubbish. We want to have a nice sparky night, in this. Certainly here in the UK, it's all dark and glum and, let's try and brighten it up by having a bit of a debate. So we always put the trends out towards the back end of the year. And the trends come from what we've been hearing, what we've been talking about. We've talked to a lot of PMO practitioners throughout the year, stuff that keeps coming up time and time again. So as far as we're concerned, that is, a trend of such. It's what, people are talking about right now. And this is what we came up with for 2023. So tonight, what we're going to do is start to go through some of them. However, before we get going, one of the things that were really interesting is we stuck on a poll on the website, and it's here so far. There's still, a bit more time for this to go, but these are all 10. It's quite a big poll. You're never going to get lots of people doing this one because it feels like it's quite a lot to read. But that gives you some insight, not that I want that to sway our lodgers, but that gives you some insight about what is being resonating with PMO people. So what will 2023 bring? What we want to do, have a little bit of debate, a bit of is it going to be a thumbs up, a thumbs down? It just really gives you an opportunity to have a listen to what's being talked about in PMO, kind of future thinking. So we've got the lodgers, we've got Zoe. Hi, Zoe.
Hello.
Hello. We've got Matt with us. Hi, Matt. You okay?
Hello, good, thank you.
Good. We've got Lane with us. Hi, Lane.
Hello.
Hello. And we've got Olga. So we've got, and I think we've just got Graham.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. So we're ready to go. Let's bring up the first one. Now, this has been chatted about quite a lot. This is about the strategy execution gap, how strategy breaks into programs and projects. And a little bit of detail was, we know there's a gap, but it was all about how the PMO can support the decision-making required in the initial stages of how the strategy breaks down into projects and programs. What do we think? Are you resonating with any of you lot, Rogers?
If I can start, I think the answer is in the question, really. The missing link there is portfolio. And a lot of the time, the function is lacking completely. So it's there in name, but not really as a portfolio function, or other times it just doesn't exist outright. And people think that by following standard processes like MSP and Prince and this and that, they'll be all right. They'll just have the strategy and then fire off a few pet projects, which is what they end up being. So to me, yeah, that question is a trend that I'm seeing come up. People are asking the questions, and that's good. And the question needs to be, how can we set up the right portfolio area so that we can translate our strategy into whatever it takes? Sometimes the strategy translates into small improvements. Sometimes it's a change of behaviors that will lead to a change in culture. It's not always projects and programs. Anyway, that's what I've seen.
So what I've been seeing is definitely the words. I'm definitely seeing the words of, we need to align strategy to projects and make sure they all come together, and we want to apply good portfolio management. And I see appetite for getting that written down and for presenting it and showing the badge. I am seeing less evidence of that actually becoming reality, because when it gets down to some of those executives actually having to say, yes, I can see this comes together, it doesn't necessarily turn into action. and actual decision making. So I see the tide absolutely heading in that direction, but I think people are realizing that actually holding firm to those prioritization principles is quite difficult. And pet projects, vanity projects, how do we get rid of them?
I would be focusing on what actually the PMO can do in the process of getting this done. And for me, it's analysis. It's providing the input for the decision. PMO doesn't make decisions, it's the decision makers, but the right analysis, i.e. questioning the alignment, as you mentioned, Zoe, the strategic alignment, questioning the financials if need be, or if the capabilities are not within the PMO, which is fair and we're all developing, having that assurance functionality being provided by another department, another function within the organization.
Yeah, I agree with all the points so far. I think, as you say, kind of the answer's almost in your question. Going back to kind of Holger's point, we have to realise that we're there to support the kind of the process. We're not there to necessarily kind of be the decision makers. We're there to provide the decision makers with the appropriate information, with the appropriate data to allow them. But I think the other thing that the PMO could really do is, and we have to look internally, is can the PMO easily kind of verbalize what those organizational objectives are, because ultimately you can only ensure alignment if you actually understand what the organization is trying to achieve. And I would suggest that like you say, in a lot of cases, I think it is an area that necessarily we don't understand what the overall organizational objectives are. So I think that's a way that we can help is to basically ensure that we're knowledgeable in what the organization is trying to achieve. So when we do that analysis, we can give informed kind of recommendations.
I think we also, yes to all of that. I think the bit that we're sometimes a little bit nervous about is realizing that we need to help those decision makers understand how they make those decisions and why they're making those decisions. So, one of the best courses that I've ever seen was an internal course. Obviously, there are lots of training organizations out there, but an internal course was about teaching accountable executives how to be accountable executives, because there's this assumption that the leaders at the top, just because they're really important and senior, know how to do it. I think PMO needs to step up and help these people understand what their role is, what they're doing, and help them to understand portfolio management.
I have come across that so many times. It's leadership that needs to be almost educated what their role is in portfolio management and how to execute on that. So setting the strategy or the strategic direction, or using the new language, objectives, key results, where are they coming from? They're not coming out of thin air. They need to be provided by the top brass to the organization and needs to be followed up. They need to hold those who deliver on behalf of the senior executives to account for the delivery. Walk the walk and talk the talk, or something what you keep on saying in English. I think that's the importance here, understanding what their role is and living up to the expectations. And critical decisions are still being made by the senior executives. There's a lot of talk about the decentralization and the decision-making being taken part by other parts of the organization. What is also clear is there are decisions that cannot be delegated. And understanding those and then making timely decisions, that's ever so important.
Okay, so we're talking portfolio management, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we need to answer the question, how the PMO can support decision making. Nobody's talking about the PMO making decisions. In the question, it says how the PMO can support. And the answer is you have to have a portfolio level capability. Otherwise, that PMO is just about purchasing programs. I'm not sure. There are some things that are needed, like executive behavior or whatever. And the PMO influence that sometimes, but you have to have pretty high level people there. Maybe, as Eileen has said before, as a PMO director. Otherwise, that's not appropriate. It's just not within the sort of conversation that you can have in most organizations, particularly if they are hierarchical like that, because it's just not your place. Maybe we don't like that, but it doesn't matter whether we like it or not. So the support that we can give with what we have is partly analysis and partly that visibility. Having whatever, a wall with paper and sticky something that says, okay, this goes from there to there, is that what you meant? And by the way, who's checking that the benefit was provided? That's, I think, so PMO need to do two things. One is to make sure that they are at portfolio level. The other types of PMO won't cut it. It doesn't matter. You're not in the conversation. You're not at the table.
Right.
And second, do things that you can do with what you have.
Well, ding ding, I like that one, Lane. Well done. You get the first point. Not for the second
Excellent.
point. There's no point. But
I lost the point. I got it, then I lost it straight away.
You keep that point, Lane. I'm sure there's going to be
Thank
more
you.
through the night.
so in terms of this being a realistic trend for 2023, do you think this is going to, because from our, my perspective, just putting these things together, there has been a lot of talk about we are getting into a position to offer more portfolio, move into a more portfolio-led type PMO. Just as Graham had put in the chat there, that it really does depend on what the remit is of that PMO. And what we're hearing is that there's more organisations are recognising that and wanting that portfolio function in place. So
I would say based on the clients I've been working on and how the work's coming through, it is all tending to be at that portfolio, help us to organise ourselves properly. And Eileen's mentioned it a few times, but I absolutely agree that PMO director role, I think, is becoming increasingly recognised as kind of the skill set that can be used out there. That's certainly the role that I am helping organisations to evolve, and I'm seeing recruitment of permanent people in those right that right level of influence. So I'm seeing the trend.
Yeah, great. I mean,
I put something in chat, and I'm just curious for the people, the lodgers and also the people on the call. COVID messed up lots of things. COVID forced portfolios to be reevaluated based on the changes in situation. One of the challenges I have when we meet people is that, well, we haven't even got a strategy to align our projects to. And interesting in terms of kind of what Zoe said, I think it's interesting that we can, even if there isn't a strategy, there is still stuff we can do to help organizations evaluate the projects, the programs, help to kind of split up scopes, kind of what's going to be done under kind of product delivery as opposed to kind of standalone projects. So I think, even if there isn't a strategy there, I still think there's other things that we can do. I'm just curious as to how many organizations have got a coherent strategy at the moment.
That's
whether
always
there's many out there.
Creating that matrix of the strategy being broken down for individual units within the organization is very hard to come by, to say the least. But let's not forget the PMO has a very special role typically to play if it is in portfolio management. All those organizational entities have strategies and have targets given to them. They do not have an enterprise view. They're not incentivized to do that. There is only one unit, hopefully, if you have a PMO or EPMO or whatever it's called, that's looking across the piece and is facilitating the process why an organization actually should be an organization, as there are trade-offs to be managed between different departments. And that should that gives for that, Graham, I saw your comment, that goes with that goes the alignment and sponsorship. My eyes are very clearly should be with the CEO or COO in order to have that enterprise view and represent it.
We on that COVID bit, Arlene, I think so what I saw was organisations, as with all the different things that happened, suddenly had to go, right, what can we stop doing now? How do we send people home and the rest of it? And those organisations, and my small experience, that had some decent portfolio management in place, found it a lot easier to be able to decide what to stop doing and what was the right things to do. And it forced that more strategic alignment, and it's coming out of that and now having to kind of make choices again about what's happening. I wonder if that's behind some of this build in understanding portfolio management from the lessons learned and also from those successes. I don't know. All
right, so we're still kind of seeing a positive outcome of COVID.
Yeah,
nice to have a couple of them, wouldn't it?
We have all heard the word pivot away from something towards someone else. Or something else, the new language we all have to learn in order to be agile or be, the one thing is clear: you cannot pivot or change on a dime, as I wrote in my article. You can't do that if you actually don't know what you're actually doing at the moment. How can you decide what to stop if you don't know what it is? And the PMO should be the arbitrator in the organization, what's actually currently happening. That's what I would seek to get us an information. Visibility, what is happening, and transparency. How far has it progressed? Does it make sense to stop, for example, or should we rather let it run another 3 months and get all the benefits out of it?
This feels real to me. What do you reckon? That this is a thing. This trend is not going to be a million miles away. And when we look back on 2023 at the end of the year,
from the kind of going back to the kind of COVID point, I think from the interaction, from kind of my network of contacts and that, I think there's a big reason why it's so, and that is, I think, basically because a lot of people did, as you say, as a result of COVID, essentially basically shut down and went into survival mode in more ways than one. And I think a lot of companies now have got quite a lot of catch up. They've got quite a lot of catch up to play for the last 2 or 3 years that they've slowed down, and essentially they've got the money to do that as well, because they didn't spend it. So that's why, and I think that's why kind of this has become such a big conversation around strategy execution, around selection is people. I think change, the rate of change has increased as a result of COVID. Now that we've come out, now that we're kind of out of the other side of it, and I think that's a different challenge. But I do think it's something that, as I say, we going back to. I think fundamentally the bits is kind of. I think Lane kind of Lane summarised it very well. And going back to, we've got to remember that we are there basically as an enabling function to this process, as opposed to the decisioning.
So I think it's a tick, but it's a small tick with lots of it's a lots of weight attached to tick.
Tiny tick.
Yeah.
Right. So you've only got a small point, Lane, then. It's not a big point.
Right, okay, so we've got a lot of big subjects. So thanks for that.